As a boy, as most other little boys are, around the age of 9 to 10, I enjoyed playing outside. I liked running around, climbing trees, you know, the usual. I remember I couldn't wait to get to school to play with my friends. Early in the morning, got dropped off, ran on the playfield. Lunchtime, we would forget to eat lunch because it was just too much running up and down to do in that single hour. In the evenings, I would try to coerce my mother to pick me up just a little bit later so I could just have a little bit more time to play. Over the course of running up and down and playing tag or catching freezes, there was a series of losing shoelaces, losing school bags, don't ask about it, ripping clothes, but more specifically, I got a bit dirty. Now, for a bit of context, my schoolyard is very dusty. Most days, very dusty. On other days, it's very muddy. Now, I went to the academy, so it was uniform. My uniform was a white shirt and black pants and black shoes. So you can imagine some afternoons my mother would be upset because I came home with the colors of my uniform switched. But for the most part, I was dirty. And what made matters worse, and don't judge me, but I hated showering. I hated it. I figured I showered that morning. There's no need for me to shower until the next day. It would tie over, it'll be fine. However, two things changed that. The first being puberty. When puberty hit, hair grew everywhere, and it implicitly said, yeah, this isn't gonna work anymore. The second, and I feel the most important, was I met a girl.
All right.
She was a girl who was clean, neat, well put together. She didn't settle for unkemptness, and so after that, I tried my best. She was one of the main reasons why I started starching up my shirt nice and crisp, never missing a crease. Always kept a sponge in my back pocket in case I need to dust off the shoes a little bit, you know? And I found out that brushing my hair isn't really much of a punishment. That young lady, that very young lady, today, probably doesn't remember that I exist, but she helped in making me clean. And today I wanna share with you an idea under the theme, getting clean, or being cleansed. Let's pray. Most gracious and kind Father, you've brought us here today to share with one another, to give a word to one another. And so, while I may not feel up to the task, I may not feel like this is where I'm supposed to be, you brought me here, you brought all of us here. And so, I simply ask that you use me. Just use me. Amen.
Amen.
Our text for today comes from Matthew 8, verse 1 to 4. Matthew 8, 1 to 4. And it says, when Jesus came down from the mountainside, large crowds followed him. A man with leprosy came and knelt before him and said, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. I am willing, he said, be clean. Immediately he was cleansed of his leprosy. Then Jesus said to him, see that you don't tell anyone, but go show yourself to the priest and offer the gift Moses commanded as a testimony to them. It was a long and hot summer's afternoon. The man, Jesus of Nazareth, is surrounded by his few chosen apostles and hundreds of followers preparing to leave the mount as they had just finished their makeshift church service. Jesus had finished breaking the bread of life in the form of the Beatitudes, as well as other necessary spiritual advice and warnings. Peter was about to give the benediction and we were closing. Everybody was getting up. The day was wrapping up, and people were coming down the mountain, implicitly trying to dismiss the crowds to go their way and share what they have learned. However, the multitude, they were still enthralled by the words, and so we continued to follow. They tried possibly to get some spiritual food, or maybe some healing, or maybe just to catch his air. Whatever the reason was, the people were content to follow Jesus wherever he went. Meanwhile, at the foot of the hill, there's a soul down there. A man. And not just a regular man. A man with a problem. This is a man who needs help. You see, he had Hansen's disease. We may not be familiar with that term, but it's commonly known as leprosy. And this disease gets its name from the Greek word lepra, which is from lepis, which is scale. A fairly simple and accurate description for the disease. Leprosy, according to the Center of Disease Control, is a disease that is caused by a slow-acting bacterium and is first noticed by skin lesions. Now, there are a few classifications for this disease as it manifests itself, and it can go from a little bit of a hypopigmentation, little blotches on your skin, to full-out lesions and nodules all over your skin. And though it's slow-acting, and I mean it can probably take 20 or so years before developing signs of an infection, it can cause paralysis as well as loss of limbs, and eventually not treated, it can prove fatal. In reading about the effects of this disease, I tried to figure out what was the worst disease I ever came across. I thought about that one summer I ended up with dengue fever during a hurricane, and I thought I was going to die, but that necessarily wasn't it. Then I thought about chickenpox, the itchy bumps that covered my body, and how as a child I was not allowed to scratch. I remember the bath in different weeds and plants. I remember the scent of burning brown flour mixed with calamine lotion covering my entire body to ease the itching. But honestly, it caused me a few bumps, a funny scent, a few days off from school so I don't spread the contagious disease. Fair. But leprosy was far worse than this. You see, leprosy had layers to being infected. Although it wasn't as contagious as people thought it wasn't really curable, and it wasn't just a death sentence physically. It was a social death sentence as well. In that time period, not so much different from ours, just more explicit, there was a hierarchical system of the day. And where you fit on this hierarchical system made a world of difference in how you were treated. Of course, during that time, men were the head of the household, the face of everything in society, and as such, we sat tall and unchallenged on the hierarchical chart. Women, on the other hand, they were just a little bit lower on the hierarchical chart because they weren't considered fully human. You see, men and women were not two different kinds of humans with two different anatomies, but they were humans who were on a vertical continuum. Like I said before, men were higher up on the scale because they were more complete, perfect, more developed. Masculinity was not determined solely by a biological development, but also your place in society. So those lacking were called unmen, and they included women, boys, slaves, effeminate males, eunuchs, and non-able-bodied men. Masculine men were able-bodied, so disabled men were considered feminine or lesser on the social standard. So leprosy wasn't just a medical problem, it was a social one. Those who were ill were not in the right relationship within the social network. They were deviants in the cultural system. On a spiritual level, people thought that leprosy was a punishment for God for your wicked ways. So people looked at this man and perceived him to be a great sinner. True or not? So what can we ascertain from this man? First of all, we know that he was sick for a long period of time, at least long enough for external signs to show that he was considered an outcast. Reading this story, it kind of bothered me because he was so irrelevant that no gospel writer considered a name for him. Charles, Isaac, Michael, we'll never know. Eric, Ken, Abraham. How about Larry? That's it. Larry the leper. And I could imagine people from a distance looking at him with scorn. Ruthless little children. They tormented Larry, throwing rocks at him, yelling, "Larry the leper, Larry the leper." And then they would just laugh as he chased them away, giggling through the whole ordeal. Also, with the progression of the disease, he would gradually begin to lose limbs and external feeling in his body. So he would no longer feel the cool breeze on a fall evening, the first snowfall to signal the beginning of winter, or perhaps the warm embrace of somebody that you love. 2, in his sickness, he was not whole, but rather broken, unmanned, destined to be alone, yelling, "Unclean, unclean," for the rest of his days. And thirdly, and most importantly, he longs to be whole. He longs to be human. He longs to be clean. And so the story goes, when coming down the hill, this leper, desperate to be clean, approaches Jesus, kneels and says, "If you can make me whole. You can make me clean." Though he has not seen, perhaps, first-hand accounts, he's heard about this rabbi. He's heard about this Jesus of Nazareth, the great physician who's capable of making one whole. He has seen from a distance how people follow this man, locking on to every single word he says. After being years of unwhole, he finds hope in this man. In this man, he's able to peek under his earthly rags of clothing and get a glimpse of the majesty of Christ, and longs to be touched and be cleansed by the Master. Seeing the man's faith and longing to be one again, Jesus, defying Levitical rules, walked up to the man and changes his life with one single touch and one set of simple sentences. He raises his hand, brushes it across the man's cheek, and says simply, "I will. Be clean." And Matthew says immediately, without hesitation, he was healed. The man who was an outcast was now returned to wholeness. Physically, his body was cured. There were no more lesions or blotches or anything of the sort. His skin was smooth as a newborn baby. People would walk up to him and ask, "Hey, what's your skincare routine?" Socially, he was restored to a social status that was not labeled as an outcast. He was able to be a part of the community once again. He's no longer the leper to those who pass in his daily life. His friends, families, colleagues, they're now simply able to call him Larry instead of Larry the leper. The spiritual implications are just a bit deeper. You see, as Jesus heals this man in front of the multitude, in front of all the people who subscribe to the notion that he's being punished by God, he's now being vindicated. In front of the crowd, he's been cleared of all charges. Jesus implicitly says to the leper, "You are forgiven." In this instance, I'm reminded of the man who Jesus heals in Luke 5, where after his friends lower him down from the roof, he heals his paralytic. And after noticing the Pharisees' thoughts of hate and disapproval, he asks, which is easier to be said, your sins are forgiven, or to say, get up and walk. Coincidentally, the story right above this one is the same story that I'm preaching about today in the Luke account. In both stories, Jesus vindicates the ailment of the men, which was interpreted as punishment for their sins. And then, in keeping with Jewish tradition, he sends a man to the priest to verify that he has been cleaned and he's been cleansed. And the man racing, rushing through the crowd, pushing past man, woman, and child, his heart filled with joy. He reflects on the moment that just happened. After years of being ill, of being looked down upon, of years of not being allowed, he is now able to present himself to the priest. He says, I have been cleansed because of this man. I can stand before friends because of this man. I can stand before family because of this man. I can stand in the holy place because of this man. I can stand in front of the righteous because of this man. When I think about this account, I wonder, do I wish to be clean? I'm reminded of a song, that old hymn that your mother sang every Sunday morning when she was doing her laundry. Oh, he touched me. Oh, he touched me. And oh, with joy filled my soul. Something happened. And now I know he touched me and made me. And so I ask, has he made me whole? Am I yearning to be released from my disease? I know I have my personal weaknesses that would make me a social outcast. If not here, definitely in heaven. Maybe you have your own personal disease. Maybe it's a disease of lying, a disease of stealing, whatever disease it is. But I ask, do you wish to be made whole? Do you, after a long day of playing in the dirt, do you want your blotches to be removed? Can I introduce you to someone who can clean you? Who can look past your dirt, your sins, your ailments, and see someone worth saving? Who can look upon you, touch you on your face with love, and simply say, be clean? There's only one who can provide that. Only one who can provide a way, a path to stand in front of the Holy One, God the Father, and after being thoroughly examined, declare, you are truly clean, without spot or blemish. Do you want to be clean? Do you? If you wish, I would just simply ask you to bow your heads as we have a word of God. God, we have our leprosy of our day. It might not be an external blemish, but it might be internal blemishes. Internally, we may be clean, we may be unclean, and we long to be made whole. We long to be not unmet, but full man, whole body, perfect, without blemish. So I say, forgive us of our sins, of where we fell short, where we lacked, where we were weak. I pray that you will continue to be with us as we travel through this land. This isn't our home, but we just passed through. And so I pray that you will touch us, that you will make us whole, that you will remind us that when you touch us, something will happen. Make us whole. In your name we pray.
Amen.
Amen.
All right, thank you.